The gun felt wrong in Jack Miller's hand. Cold, foreign, like shaking hands with a ghost he'd buried 3 years ago. Three men stood between him and the child. Military bearing. Professional spacing. The kind of formation that screamed special operations training, the kind that meant these weren't street criminals hoping for a quick payday. These were killers. The little girl, 7, maybe 8, blonde hair tangled and wet with tears, pressed herself against the elevator doors behind him. Her stuffed rabbit, missing one button eye, dangled from fingers gone white with terror. 20 feet of polished marble corridor separated Jack from the lead operative. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting the scene in harsh clinical white. The Morgan Technologies logo gleamed on the wall like a silent witness to what was about to happen. "Walk away, janitor." The lead man's accent carried Eastern European edges, vowels flattened by years in places where English was a second language and violence was the first. "This isn't your business." Jack's eyes cataloged everything the way they'd been trained to 15 years ago. 2 exits, 3 hostiles, 1 civilian. The first man carried his weight on his left leg, old injury, probably knee. The second kept touching his holster, nervous habit, would be slow on the draw. The third was the dangerous one. Still, patient, eyes that had seen death and made peace with it. "Can't do that." The words came out quiet, almost conversational, but something in Jack's posture shifted. The maintenance uniform suddenly seemed like a costume, a disguise that no longer fit the man wearing it. The lead operative laughed, genuine amusement, the kind that came from absolute certainty in one's own superiority. "And you're going to stop us." "You," Jack set down his mop. The wooden handle clattered against marble, the sound echoing through the empty corridor like a starting pistol. "Yeah, I am." He moved. The first operative's weapon came up too slow. Always too slow when you underestimated your opponent. Jack's forearm deflected the barrel before the finger found the trigger elbow, driving forward with 15 years of muscle memory behind it. The strike caught the man's throat with surgical precision. Not hard enough to kill, just hard enough to end the fight before it began. The body hit the floor, gasping hands clutching at a windpipe that had temporarily forgotten how to work. 1 second, the second operative pivoted, reaching for his sidearm, with the practiced motion of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. But Jack was already inside his guard, or too close for the weapon to matter. Wrist control, leverage, momentum redirection. The man's own weight became the weapon, slamming him into the wall with enough force to crack the drywall beneath the paint. The gun clattered away across the marble. The body followed unconscious before it finished sliding. 3 seconds. The third man, the dangerous one, had drawn a knife. Tactical blades, 7 inches ceramic edge, that wouldn't trigger metal detectors. Smart choice for close quarters. Stupid choice against someone who'd spent a decade teaching knife defense to operators who would never officially exist. Jack caught the wrist on the first thrust, twisted until he felt the tendons pop, swept the legs as the man's balance shifted to compensate for the pain. The back of the operative's skull met marble with a sound that would echo in Jack's dreams for weeks. 6 seconds. 3 men. Done. Jack stood among the bodies, breathing, controlled heart rate already settling back toward baseline. The corridor was silent except for the buzz of fluorescent lights and the quiet whimpering of a terrified child. He turned. The little girl stared at him with eyes too wide for her face, the kind of eyes that had just watched their understanding of the world shatter into pieces too small to reassemble. Are you a superhero?" The question hit harder than any of the punches he'd just thrown. "No, sweetheart." Jack knelt, bringing himself to her eye level, making himself small and safe, and nothing like what she just witnessed. Just someone who used to do this for a living. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, expecting security, expecting questions, expecting the complications that always followed moments like this. The screen showed an unknown number. The message was 3 words. "Your son is next." Jack's blood turned to ice water. "Alex, school." 20 minutes across town on a good day, and this wasn't a good day. This was the kind of day where good days went to die. He looked at the security camera, blinking red in the corner. Looked at the 3 bodies that would require explanations he couldn't give. Looked at the little girl who needed her mother and the protection of people who weren't ghosts from classified operations. He had maybe 5 minutes before backup arrived, before the questions started, before the past he'd buried came clawing its way back into the light. Somewhere across Chicago, his 8-year-old son was in danger. And Jack Miller, maintenance worker, single father, ghost, was about to become something else entirely. The elevator doors opened behind him. A woman stepped out, flanked by security guards whose tactical postures marked them as former military. Her designer suit probably cost more than Jack made in 6 months. Her eyes swept the scene with the calculating precision of someone who'd built an empire by missing nothing. Sarah Hayes, CEO of Morgan Technologies, owner of this building and everything in it, including apparently the daughter Jack had just saved. "Mommy." The little girl ran to her mother, rabbit bouncing against her chest. Sarah caught her daughter without breaking eye contact with Jack. Something flickered in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or the beginning of it. "Who are you?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them fully understood yet. Jack's phone buzzed again. Same number, same 3 words. He didn't have time for questions, didn't have time for explanations, didn't have time for anything except the 20 minutes between him and his son. "Nobody important." He was already moving toward the stairs when her voice stopped him cold. "Wait, I know you. You were at Michael's funeral. You stood in the back. You left before anyone could speak to you." Jack's spine stiffened. The name hit him like a bullet to the chest. Michael. Michael Hayes was my husband. Sarah's voice carried the edge of someone who'd spent 5 years asking questions no one would answer. "And you know something about how he died." 12 hours earlier, Jack Miller had been invisible. The maintenance uniform was his disguise, his camouflage, his way of moving through a world that had no place for men like him. Gray fabric that made security guards look past him instead of at him. A name badge that said Jack M. and nothing else, because nothing else mattered when you were the man who emptied trash cans and mopped floors at 3 in the morning. 4:30 came the way it always did, sudden and unwelcome, announced by an alarm clock that had survived 2 apartments in one cross-country move. Jack silenced it before the second beep, already swinging his legs over the side of the bed, already cataloging the sounds of the apartment the way he'd cataloged patrol routes in Kandahar. Floorboards creaking in the hallway, settling, not footsteps. Wind rattling the window in the kitchen, needs weather stripping, added to the list of things he couldn't afford to fix. And underneath it all, the soft wheeze of labored breathing from the room next door. "Alex." Jack moved on silent feet down the narrow hallway, easing open the door to his son's room with the care of a man disarming an explosive. The nightlight cast soft blue shadows across the bed, across the posters of dinosaurs and rockets that covered wall, desperate for fresh paint. His son slept fitfully, chest rising and falling, with the effort that came from lungs that had never worked quite right. The inhaler sat on the nightstand within easy reach, always within easy reach, because the 3 seconds it took to find it during an attack could feel like 3 hours, $300 a month. That's what those 3 seconds cost. $300 Jack didn't have for the medication that kept his son breathing, didn't have for the specialist visits that might find a better treatment, didn't have for the life his boy deserved, instead of the one they'd built from the wreckage of everything that came before. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching his son breathe, counting each inhale like a prayer he'd forgotten how to say properly. Catherine used to do this, stand in the doorway in the middle of the night, watching over their son, as if the force of her love alone could keep the darkness at bay. She'd been better at it than Jack, better at the softness that parenting required, better at being human in all the ways his training had scraped away. 3 years. 3 years since the accident that wasn't an accident. 3 years since the phone call that had shattered what remained of his world. 3 years of learning how to be a single father, a maintenance worker, a ghost. Some promises you keep because breaking them would destroy you more completely than any bullet ever could. Jack closed the door and headed for the kitchen. Coffee. Black. No sugar. The way he'd learned to drink it in places where sugar was a luxury and survival was measured in the bitter warmth of whatever caffeine you could find. The bills on the kitchen table had multiplied overnight the way bills always did when you weren't looking. Rent, utilities, Alex's school fees, the credit card he'd used to cover last month's medication when the insurance claim got denied for reasons no one could explain in plain English. $53 in the checking account. Payday in 9 days. 9 days of creative mathematics and carefully rationed groceries and praying nothing else went wrong. Jack's hands moved through the familiar motions of his morning routine without conscious direction. Check the locks, check the windows, check the fire escape that Alex knew to use if anything ever happened while Jack was at work. Paranoid habits maybe, but paranoia had kept him alive through 3 tours in places that made Chicago's South Side look like a vacation destination. By 5:30, he was walking through the service entrance of Morgan Technologies, invisible in his maintenance uniform, just another working pour that the cameras recorded and the executives never saw. The building rose 50 floors above downtown Chicago, all glass and steel, and the kind of architectural ambition that came from having more money than God and less restraint than common sense. Jack had cleaned offices in buildings like this for 3 years now, pushing his cart through corridors where million-dollar deals happened behind closed doors, and janitors were furniture that occasionally needed to be moved. Jack! Mrs. Chen's voice carried warmth that felt out of place in the sterile lobby. The elderly receptionist had worked the night shift on floor 42 for longer than most of the executives had been alive. She saw everything, said nothing, the kind of witness corporations loved and employees treasured. "Mrs. Chen, you're here late." Board meeting ran long, the usual nonsense about quarterly projections and synergy optimization. Her eyes crinkled with amusement at the corporate buzzwords. "You look tired." "Long night." "You mean a long 3 years." She pressed a wrapped sandwich into his hands before he could object. "Leftover from the catering. They won't miss it." Pride made him want to refuse. Love for his son made him accept. The calculation wasn't difficult when you'd spent weeks choosing between groceries and medication. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen." "You're a good father, Jack. Don't let this place make you forget that." The words followed him through his shift, echoing in the empty corridors as he emptied trash cans filled with discarded coffee cups and documents shredded beyond reconstruction. Good father. The phrase felt like a costume that didn't quite fit, like the maintenance uniform that hid who he'd been before, like the name badge that said Jack M., instead of the designation that still appeared in classified files no civilian would ever read. Ghost, that's what they'd called him. Not because he killed silently, though he had more times than his conscience wanted to count, but because he moved through missions without leaving traces, extracted targets without alerting security, completed objectives that couldn't officially exist and therefore required operators who couldn't officially exist either. 15 years of being a ghost, 3 years of being a father. The math didn't add up to a whole person, but it was all Jack had left. The school pickup line at Lincoln Elementary stretched around the block, filled with SUVs and minivans driven by parents who'd never had to choose between heat and groceries. Jack waited at the corner maintenance uniform, exchanged for jeans and a worn jacket that had seen better days during the Bush administration. Alex emerged last, the way he always did, small for his age, backpack, too heavy for his thin shoulders, inhaler-shaped bulge visible in his jacket pocket. Catherine's blue eyes looked out from a face that carried Jack's stubborn jaw and refusal to quit. "Hey, soldier." The nickname earned him a smile that could power cities. "Hey, Dad. How was school?" "I got an A on my history test. Did you know that during World War II, carrier pigeons saved thousands of lives by delivering messages across enemy lines?" "I did not know that." "There was one named Cher Ami who got shot in the chest and still delivered her message. She saved almost 200 soldiers." Alex's eyes shone with the fierce admiration that only children could muster for heroes they'd never met. Isn't that amazing? Jack thought about the men and women he'd served with, the ones who'd taken bullets and kept moving, the ones who'd crawled through firefights to reach wounded teammates, the ones who'd come home in boxes, and the ones who'd come home broken in ways no metal could fix. "Yeah, buddy, that's pretty amazing." They walked home together through streets that grew progressively less welcoming, past buildings where the graffiti told stories of territorial disputes and economic despair. Alex chattered about school and birds and the book he was reading about astronauts, and Jack listened with one ear while the other tracked their surroundings the way it always did. The black SUV parked across from their building had government plates. Tinted windows, engine running despite the cold. Jack filed it away. Probably nothing. Probably someone visiting a neighbor. Probably not connected to anything from his past because his past was buried under 3 years of anonymity and a new identity that had cost favors he could never repay. But the weight of it stayed with him. The awareness, the readiness, some habits you never lost. Some training ran deeper than memory. Their apartment occupied the fourth floor of a building that had given up on maintenance around the same time Jack's life had fallen apart. Cracked plaster, water stains on the ceiling, locks that required jiggling and precise pressure to open. Home. Dad, Alex's voice drifted from his bedroom where he was supposed to be doing homework, but was probably reading about birds again. Can we get pizza tonight? We had pizza last week. That was 5 days ago, which makes it last week. Dad, that's not how weeks work. Jack smiled despite himself. Do your homework, soldier. We'll discuss pizza negotiations after. The evening settled into its familiar rhythm. Homework help that made Jack realize how much mathematics had changed since his own schooling. Dinner that stretched ground beef and canned vegetables into something approximating nutrition. Alex's questions about the world that ranged from simple to philosophical without warning. Dad, why do you work at night? The question came during dishwashing, Jack's hands submerged in soapy water while Alex dried with a diligence that exceeded his years. Because that's when the building needs cleaning. But you're smart. You know everything about history and geography and how things work. Alex's forehead creased with the concentration of a child trying to solve a puzzle designed for adults. You could do something else. Like what? I don't know. Something important. Jack's hands stilled in the water. Important. The word carried weight. His son couldn't understand memories of missions that had mattered and costs that had been paid in blood and bullets and the broken promises of governments that couldn't acknowledge the sacrifices made in their names. Being your dad is the most important thing I've ever done. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. Jack dried his hands, knelt to bring himself level with his son. Listen to me. Important doesn't mean famous or rich or powerful. Important means doing what matters for the people who matter to you. And you matter to me more than anything else in this world. Alex considered this with the seriousness only children possessed. Mom said you were a hero once, before. The words hit like a physical blow. Catherine. Always Catherine, finding ways to speak to him from beyond the grave through the sun they'd made together. That was a long time ago, buddy. Were you a hero? Jack thought about Kandahar, about Michael, about the screams that still woke him at 2 a.m, and the faces that haunted the spaces between heartbeats. I was a soldier. That's different. How? Because heroes save everyone. Because heroes don't carry body counts like balance sheets. Because heroes don't watch their best friends die and spend every day since wondering if they could have done something different. It just is. Later, after Alex had fallen asleep with his book about astronauts open on his chest, Jack stood by the window and watched the street below. The SUV was gone. The sidewalks were empty. The city hummed with the distant pulse of traffic and sirens and lives being lived by people who'd never had to choose between their conscience and their orders. His phone sat on the table, silent, unchanged since the call 3 years ago that had ended one life and begun another. The number that appeared in his contacts simply as Colonel hadn't been dialed in all that time, hadn't needed to be, because the deal had been clear: stay disappeared, and the past would stay buried where it belonged. But some graves weren't deep enough. Some ghosts refused to stay dead. And somewhere across the city, in the gleaming tower of Morgan Technologies, events were already in motion that would drag Jack Miller out of the shadows and back into the world he'd tried so hard to leave behind. The attack came at 11:47 p.m. Jack had finished the executive floors and was working his way down toward the data center when he heard a sound that didn't belong in the quiet symphony of nighttime building maintenance. Footsteps. Multiple sets. The kind of coordinated movement that spoke of training and purpose. His body recognized the pattern before his mind could process it. Tactical formation, 3-man team. Professional spacing that minimized exposure while maximizing coverage. Not security. Security walked these halls like they owned them. These footsteps carried the careful precision of people who didn't belong and didn't care. Jack's hand moved to his belt before he remembered he didn't carry anymore. No sidearm, no knife, No comms unit linked to a team that would have his back when things went sideways. Just a maintenance worker with a mop and a past he'd tried to bury. The scream shattered his calculations. High-pitched, terrified, young. A child's scream in a building that should have been empty except for security and the cleaning crew. Jack moved before conscious thought could intervene, years of training overriding 3 years of deliberate rust. His feet carried him toward the sound at a pace that wasn't quite running, but covered ground faster than walking ever could. Corner check, sight lines, threat assessment, floor 47, the executive level, where the boardroom overlooked the city and decisions worth millions were made by people who never saw the consequences. Three men had a little girl cornered near the elevator bank. Tactical gear, military bearing, the kind of professionals who charge six figures for jobs that couldn't be discussed in polite company. The girl couldn't have been more than 7, blonde hair disheveled from whatever struggle had preceded Jack's arrival. A stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest like a talisman against the monsters that had stepped out of her nightmares and into reality. Emma Hayes, the CEO's daughter. Jack recognized her from the company newsletter that appeared in the break room, from the photos that decorated Sarah Hayes' office on the 50th floor, from the casual conversations of employees who talked about the boss's family like they were characters in a soap opera. One of the men reached for her. Emma's whimper cut through the air like a blade. "Please, I want my mommy." "Your mommy's going to pay a lot of money for you, sweetheart." The operative's voice carried no emotion, no hesitation. A man discussing a business transaction, not a kidnapping. "Now be quiet and come with us." Jack should have called security, should have hit the alarm panel on the wall 3 feet to his left. Should have done any of the sensible things that sensible people did when faced with situations beyond their capabilities. Instead, he stepped out of the shadows. The rest happened in fragments. 6 seconds of violence that his body executed while his mind observed from somewhere distant and cold. First man throat strike incapacitation. Second man wrist control momentum, redirect unconscious. Third man knife defense, dislocate takedown. 3 professionals who'd probably never lost a fight. 3 bodies on the marble floor. 6 seconds. Some skills you never lost. Some training carved itself into your bones and waited. Now Jack knelt before a terrified child, trying to remember how to be human, trying to find words that would make sense of what she'd just witnessed. "You're safe now." The words felt inadequate. Everything felt inadequate against the magnitude of what he'd just revealed. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. 3 words that turned his blood to winter. "Your son is next." The elevator opened. Sarah Hayes appeared. Questions began. And somewhere across Chicago, 8-year-old Alex Miller became leverage in a war his father had thought was over. The drive to Lincoln Elementary should have taken 20 minutes. Jack made it in 12, breaking traffic laws he couldn't afford to break in a vehicle that belonged to someone else entirely. Sarah Hayes sat in the passenger seat, her security detail following in a second car, her daughter secured in the building they just left with guards Jack had personally vetted in the 90 seconds before departure. "You're going to explain everything." Her voice carried the steel of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms and getting answers. "Who you are, how you knew Michael, why 3 mercenaries just tried to kidnap my daughter. After. After what? After I know my son is safe." The school was dark when they arrived, long past the hours when children learned mathematics and history and all the other subjects that seemed so important until real life intervened. Jack was out of the car before it stopped moving, feet carrying him toward the building, with a desperation he hadn't felt since the night Catherine died. The side door was unlocked. Should have been secured. Wasn't. Jack drew the weapon he'd taken from one of the unconscious operatives at Morgan Tower. The familiar weight settled into his grip like a handshake with an old friend he'd hoped never to see again. The hallways were empty, silent, the kind of silence that preceded violence or followed it. His phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Library. Jack moved through corridors decorated with children's artwork and inspirational posters, past classrooms, where his son had learned to read and multiply and believed that the world was fundamentally safe. The weapon led the way, clearing corners and doorways with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done it thousands of times in places far less welcoming. The library door stood slightly ajar. Light spilled through the gap. Jack entered low and fast, scanning for threats, cataloging positions, ready to kill anything that stood between him and his son. Alex huddled behind the biographies section, small form pressed against shelves containing books about presidents and scientists and heroes who changed the world. His inhaler clutched in one hand, his eyes, Catherine's eyes, wide with fear and relief, and questions too big for an 8-year-old to ask. Dad. Jack crossed the distance in 3 strides, sweeping his son into an embrace that probably hurt, but neither of them cared. Alex's arms wrapped around his neck, small body shaking with the aftermath of adrenaline and terror. You're okay. You're okay. I'm here. Men came. Alex's voice was muffled against Jack's shoulder. They were asking about you, saying you were dangerous, that you did bad things, but I didn't tell them anything. That's my soldier. Jack pulled back just enough to check for injuries, hands running over arms and legs and torso with the clinical efficiency of a combat medic. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? No, I hid when I heard them coming. Like you taught me. Like you taught me. The words cut deeper than any blade. He'd trained his son for this. Trained an 8-year-old to hide from threats, to stay silent, to survive. What kind of father prepared his child for violence? The kind who knew violence was coming. The kind who'd spent 3 years waiting for the past to find him. Footsteps in the hallway announced Sarah's arrival. She appeared in the doorway, designer suit incongruous against the elementary school backdrop, face carrying an expression Jack couldn't quite read. Is he okay? He's okay. Jack helped Alex to his feet, keeping one arm around his son's shoulders. We need to go. Somewhere secure. Somewhere they can't. My building has the best security in the city. Your building just got penetrated by 3 professional operatives. Who you stopped in 6 seconds. Sarah's eyes met his. I don't know who you are, Jack Miller, but my husband trusted you enough to want you at his funeral, and you just saved my daughter's life. She glanced at Alex, something softening in her expression. I have a safe room, reinforced, off the building schematics. If anyone can protect both of our children tonight, I'm guessing it's you. Jack wanted to refuse. Wanted to take his son and disappear into the night, find a bus station, catch a ride to somewhere the past couldn't follow. But he tried that once. Tried hiding and running and pretending that burying yourself deep enough would keep the ghosts from finding you. It hadn't worked. The grave wasn't deep enough. It never was. One night, the words came out rough, scraped, raw by emotions he'd spent 3 years trying to bury. Then I want answers about Michael, about whoever's behind this, about why my son just became a target. You'll have them. Sarah's voice carried the weight of a promise, the kind that couldn't be broken without consequence. All of them. The safe room occupied a hidden corner of Sarah's penthouse, accessible through a door disguised as a bookshelf and protected by biometrics that couldn't be fooled or forced. Jack swept the space with professional thoroughness, while Alex and Emma explored cautiously, 2 children bonded by shared trauma and the strange circumstances that had thrown them together. The rabbit's name is Captain Hoppy. Emma held up her one-eyed companion for Alex's inspection. He's been to every country in the world. That's a lot of countries. He's very brave. Like my dad. Jack pretended not to hear. Pretended the words didn't hit him like punches to the chest. Pretended he was still capable of being the hero his son believed he was. Sarah waited until the children were settled before leading him to the kitchen, far enough away for adult conversation, but close enough to respond if needed. Raymond Chen is running facial recognition on the menu stopped. She poured 2 glasses of scotch, handed him one without asking if he wanted it. He should have results within the hour. Raymond Chen, head of security, former military. Michael recommended him before. She stopped, swallowed. Before Erpfir. Jack took the scotch but didn't drink. What do you know about Kandahar? The question landed like a grenade. Sarah's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, confusion, grief, anger, before settling on something that might have been resignation. I know my husband died there. I know the mission was classified beyond anything I could access, even with a senator's assistance. I know that somewhere in those files are answers about why Michael had to die and why the government decided his family didn't deserve to know. The mission wasn't about what the files say. Then what was it about? Jack looked at his scotch. at the amber liquid that caught the light like liquid gold, at the reflection of a man he barely recognized wearing the face of a janitor and carrying the ghost of a soldier. It was about a prototype, weapons technology stolen from a defense contractor. Intel suggested it was being sold to foreign powers, the kind of transaction that could shift the balance of military power for a generation. Michael led the team. Michael led the team. I was his second. 5 of us went in, 2 came out. Jack's voice went flat the way it always did when he talked about things that mattered too much. The mission was a trap. Enemy knew we were coming. Michael stayed behind to cover our extraction. He told me to get the team out. And you did. And I did. The words tasted like ash, like failure, like the promise he'd made to a dying friend that had cost him everything. He gave me 30 seconds. 30 seconds to reach the extraction point with what remained of our team. 30 seconds while he held off an army. And then the building came down. Michael, the enemy, the prototype, all of it buried under 1,000 tons of rubble in a country that officially didn't know we existed. Sarah's glass trembled in her hands. Scotch sloshed against crystal. You were there when he died. I was there. Jack finally took a drink. The burn didn't help. Nothing helped. And the last thing he said to me, the last thing before the comms cut out, was to protect his family. To protect you, to protect Emma. 5 years. Sarah's voice cracked around the edges, grief and anger fighting for dominance. 5 years, I've been waiting for someone to tell me what happened. 5 years of classified files and government runaround and lies layered on lies. And you've known this whole time. You were at the funeral. You saw me standing there with a daughter who would grow up without her father, and you said nothing. I couldn't. Couldn't or wouldn't. Both. Jack set down his glass. Sarah, the people who arranged that ambush, the people who killed Michael, they're not gone. They're connected, powerful, the kind of people who make problems disappear when those problems become inconvenient. Is that what Michael was, an inconvenience? Michael discovered something during the mission, something about who was really buying that prototype, something that if it got out would destroy people in very high places. Jack met her eyes. He told me, right before the end, he told me who was behind it all. Then why didn't you come forward? Why didn't you? Because they killed my wife. The words fell into silence. Sarah's face went pale. Catherine, 3 years ago, the police said car accident, brake lines that failed vehicle that rolled into oncoming traffic. But I know that it was a warning, a message. Keep your mouth shut or your son is next. So you disappeared. I became a ghost, changed my name, moved across the country, took a job where no one would look twice at me. Jack laughed and the sound held no humor. 3 years of mopping floors and emptying trash and pretending I was nobody. 3 years of keeping my head down and my son safe. And tonight they found me anyway. Jack's jaw tightened. Tonight they came for your daughter and I couldn't stand by and watch. And now they know I'm still alive. They know where I work. They know about Alex. The door to the safe room opened. Alex appeared, small form silhouetted against the light from within. Dad, I can't sleep. Jack crossed to his son, knelt to meet his eyes. Bad dreams. Not yet, but I can feel them waiting. The words carried weight beyond their years. An 8-year-old who understood that nightmares weren't just things that happened while you slept. An 8-year-old who'd been trained by his father to hide from danger and trust no one outside their small family. Come here. Jack pulled Alex into his arms. You know what your mom used to say about bad dreams? That they're just the brain's way of processing fear. And what did she say to do about fear? Alex's voice was muffled against Jack's chest. Face it. Understand it. Use it. That's right. Fear isn't the enemy soldier. Fear is information. It tells you something needs attention. Are we in danger? Dad, we in danger, Jack hesitated. Catherine had always said never lie to Alex, that children could smell dishonesty and it destroyed trust more surely than any betrayal. Yes, we're in real danger. Because of what you used to do before. Yes. Alex pulled back, looked his father in the eyes with an intensity that reminded Jack painfully of Catherine. Then you need to do it again, whatever it was. You need to stop the bad people. Buddy, it's not that simple. You're the bravest person I know, Dad. Mom said so. She said you were a hero even if you didn't believe it. Alex's small hand found Jack squeezed with all the strength an 8-year-old could muster. I believe it. Jack felt something crack inside him. The wall he'd built between who he was and who he'd been. The barrier that had kept the ghost buried and the father functioning. His son believed in him, even knowing the danger, even understanding that the past was catching up. Okay. The word came out as a whisper. Okay. He stood Alex's hands still in his and turned to face Sarah Hayes. She stood in the kitchen doorway, watching with an expression that had shifted from anger to something else entirely. There's a man. Jack's voice was steady now. Decision made, path chosen. A colonel who ran the operation. The only one who knows the full truth about Kandahar. About Michael. About who's really behind this. Can you reach him? Jack pulled out the phone he hadn't used in 3 years. The contact that had sat dormant, waiting for a moment he had hoped would never come. Only one way to find out. He pressed call. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Ghost, it's been a while. Colonel Morrison, I'm reactivating. Silence, then tell me everything. Jack looked at his son, at Sarah Hayes, widow of his best friend, at the situation that had spiraled so far beyond his control that the only option left was to stop hiding and start hunting. They came for me tonight, sir. They came for my son. And I need to know about Kandahar, about what Michael really discovered, about who we're actually fighting. Morrison's voice was grim when he finally replied, the kind of grim that preceded bad news delivered in measured doses. Jack, there's something you need to understand. Something I should have told you years ago. A pause. Kandahar wasn't just about the prototype. It was about covering up who was buying it, and the people involved, the people who killed Michael, who killed your wife, who are coming for you now. They're not some foreign power or criminal organization. Then who? They're us, Jack, Americans, people in suits who make decisions in boardrooms and never face consequences. People who profit from wars they'll never fight in countries they'll never visit. Jack's hand tightened on the phone. Names, I need names. I'll give you everything I have. But Jack, Morrison's voice dropped lower, carrying the weight of warnings that couldn't be unspoken. What you're about to uncover goes deeper than you can imagine. And once you start down this path, there's no coming back. Not for you, not for your son, not for anyone you care about. Jack looked at Alex, at Sarah, at the life he'd built from the ashes of the one that had been taken from him. I stopped coming back 3 years ago, Colonel, when they killed Catherine, when they made my son a target. His voice hardened into something that hadn't existed for 3 years, something that had been waiting patient and cold for the moment it would be needed again. Now I'm going to finish what Michael started, and God help anyone who stands in my way. Some promises you keep because breaking them would destroy you. Some promises you keep because keeping them might destroy everything else. Jack Miller had spent 3 years running from who he was. Tonight the ghost came back, and this time he was going to war. Names, dates, connections that stretched from Kandahar to corporate boardrooms to the halls of government itself. A web of corruption so vast that pulling one thread threatened to unravel everything. Behind him, Sarah Hayes moved through her kitchen with the mechanical precision of someone running on adrenaline and determination. Coffee brewing, plates arranged. The domestic rituals of normalcy performed in circumstances that were anything but. The children are asleep. Her voice carried exhaustion wrapped in steel. Emma asked if the bad men would come back. I didn't know what to tell her. Tell her the truth, that her mother won't let anything happen to her. And if I can't keep that promise, Jack turned from the window. Sarah stood in the kitchen doorway, designer suit exchanged for casual clothes that made her look younger and more vulnerable than the CEO persona she wore like armor. Then I will. The words hung between them, weighted with implications neither fully understood. A promise from a stranger who'd been a ghost. A commitment from a man who'd already lost everything once. Sarah crossed to the counter, poured 2 cups of coffee, handed him one, without asking if he wanted it. Morrison, what did he tell you? That Kandahar was about more than a weapons prototype, that the buyers weren't foreign powers. Jack took the coffee, let the heat seep into hands that had dealt death hours earlier. That the people who killed Michael, who killed my wife, are Americans, corporate executives, politicians, people who profit from wars they'll never fight. Names, one name, the one that matters. Jack set down his cup. Conrad Vance. Sarah's face went through a rapid transformation, confusion to recognition to cold fury. Vance Industries. He's been trying to acquire Morgan Technologies for years. Hostile takeover attempts, patent disputes, every dirty trick in the corporate playbook. It's not about business competition. It's about technology. Jack moved to the window again, watching the city wake up below. 5 years ago, Vance was selling military prototypes to the highest bidder. Foreign governments, terrorist organizations, anyone with enough money and no conscience about how the weapons would be used. And Michael discovered this. Michael documented it, recorded meetings, photographed transactions, built a case that would have destroyed Vance and everyone connected to him. Jack's reflection stared back from the glass, a ghost superimposed on the Chicago skyline. That's why they ambushed us. Not to protect the prototype, to protect the secret of who was really buying it. But if Michael had evidence, the evidence was on him when the building came down, or so everyone assumed. Jack reached into his pocket, pulled out a worn compass that had traveled with him through 3 years of hiding. Michael gave me this before the mission. Said it was for luck. Said if anything happened, I should keep it close. Sarah stared at the compass. Ordinary, unremarkable. The kind of thing you'd find in any military surplus store. There's a drive hidden inside. Military-grade encryption. Morrison's team has been working on cracking it for years. Jack turned the compass over in his hands. They succeeded 2 weeks ago. Everything Michael collected, every name, every transaction, every piece of evidence, it's all here. Then why haven't they acted? Why hasn't Vance been arrested? Because the evidence implicates people at every level. Politicians who took bribes, military officials who looked the other way, intelligence operatives who helped cover up the paper trail. Jack met her eyes. Using this evidence means going to war with some of the most powerful people in the country. Morrison was waiting for the right moment. And now they've come after my son. Now they've tried to kidnap your daughter. Jack's voice hardened into something cold and sharp. Now the moment has arrived. The morning brought Raymond Chen to Sarah's penthouse, his security team establishing a perimeter that Jack evaluated with professional appreciation and personal suspicion. Former military bearing, controlled movements. The kind of man who'd seen combat and learned from it. Too perfect, too polished. The thought lodged in Jack's mind like a splinter he couldn't quite reach. Facial recognition came back on the 3 men from last night. Chen spread photographs across the dining table, his voice carrying the clipped efficiency of a briefing officer. All former special operations. 2 ex-Delta, 1 former SEAL. They've been working private contracts for the past 3 years, the kind of jobs that don't appear on any official records. Who's paying them? Shell Company registered in the Caymans. That company connects to another in Switzerland, which connects to a holding corporation in Delaware. Chen pulled up a final document. The Delaware Corporation is owned by Vance Industries. Sarah's hands curled into fists. Conrad has been trying to destroy me for years, but this hiring mercenaries attempting to kidnap my daughter, this is insane. It's desperate. Jack studied the photographs, memorizing faces that might appear again. Vance Industries' stock has been in free fall for 18 months. Morgan Technologies is on the verge of a quantum computing breakthrough that could make his entire company obsolete. If he can't acquire your technology legitimately, he'll acquire it by force or eliminate the competition entirely. Both. Jack looked at Chen, watched the security chief's face for reactions that might reveal more than his words. What's the current threat assessment? I've tripled security at Morgan Tower. Personal details on Mrs. Hayes and Emma around the clock. Your son, Chen hesitated. I can extend protection to him as well if you'll allow it. My son stays with me. Mr. Miller, with respect, you can't provide the same level of security that My son stays with me. The words came out flat, final. The voice of a man who'd learned that trusting others with what mattered most led to graves and grief. Chen's expression flickered something that might have been irritation or something darker before settling back into professional neutrality. As you wish, but I'd recommend relocating to a secure facility until we can neutralize the threat. Neutralize how? I have contacts, former colleagues who handle situations like this. Chen's voice dropped. Quietly, permanently. Jack filed the offer away, analyzed it, found it interesting that a head of corporate security would so readily suggest assassination as a solution. We'll consider all options. Sarah's CEO voice had returned commanding and controlled. For now, I want a full security audit of Morgan Tower. Every access point, every employee with clearance above level 3. If Vance has people inside my company, I want to know. Already underway, ma'am. After Chen left, Jack stood at the window again, watching the security chief's vehicle merge into Chicago traffic. The splinter of suspicion had grown into something larger, something that demanded attention. You don't trust him. Sarah appeared beside him, her reflection joining his in the glass. I don't trust anyone I haven't personally vetted. Michael vetted him, recommended him for the position. Michael's been dead for 5 years. A lot can change. Jack turned from the window. Where did Chen serve Army? Special Forces, I think. His file is in my office. I want to see it. The file told a story that matched what Chen had presented: exemplary service record, multiple commendations, honorable discharge followed by private security work. Too clean, too complete. The kind of background that came from careful construction rather than lived experience. Jack had seen files like this before. Had helped create them, in fact, for operatives who needed covers that would withstand scrutiny. The real Raymond Chen, if that was even his name, was buried somewhere beneath layers of official documentation and manufactured history. There's something wrong. Jack closed the file, handed it back to Sarah. I can't prove it yet, but this man isn't who he claims to be. You're suggesting my head of security is compromised. I'm suggesting we proceed as if he might be. Limit what information he has access to. Keep the compass and its contents between us and Morrison. Sarah studied him with eyes that had built a billion-dollar company by reading people accurately. 3 hours ago, you were a janitor who cleaned my building. Now you're running counterintelligence operations from my penthouse. 3 hours ago, your daughter was almost kidnapped, and my son received death threats. Situations change. Who are you, Jack Miller, really? The question deserved an honest answer. Jack gave her one. I'm someone who made a promise to your husband, someone who spent 3 years hiding from the consequences of keeping that promise. He met her eyes, and someone who's done hiding. The warehouse occupied a forgotten corner of South Chicago, surrounded by chain-link fencing, topped with razor wire, and the rusted carcasses of industrial ambition. Morrison's intelligence placed it as a staging area for Vance's mercenary operations, a logistics hub where men and weapons moved through the city's underbelly. Jack approached alone over Sarah's objections and against every protocol of tactical engagement he'd ever learned. Solo operations against fortified positions were suicide missions dressed up as heroism. He knew this, had taught it to younger operators who thought courage could substitute for proper planning. But proper planning required time he didn't have and resources he couldn't access. Alex was hidden in Sarah's safe room with Emma, guarded by men Jack didn't fully trust, waiting for a father who might not return. Some missions didn't allow for careful planning. Some missions only allowed for action. The service entrance yielded to lockpicks that had survived 3 years of disused muscle memory, guiding hands that had opened doors in Baghdad, Kabul, in a dozen places that didn't officially exist. Inside the warehouse opened into a cathedral of shadows, steel beams rising like ribs toward a ceiling, lost in darkness, scattered crates creating a maze of potential cover and concealment. Jack counted 8 hostiles on his first sweep. Combat gear, military bearing, the same professional competence he'd seen in the men who'd come for Emma. Vance was paying premium prices for premium killers. The first guard died without sound consciousness, departing courtesy of a sleeper hold, applied with the precision of long practice. Jack lowered the body gently, stripped it of weapons and communications, moved deeper into the warehouse with the patience of a predator who understood that speed killed more operators than bullets. The second guard required more creativity. A thrown piece of debris drew attention left, while Jack came from the right, the impact of skull against concrete lost in the ambient noise of distant traffic and settling metal. 2 down, 6 remaining. The documents he found changed everything. Spread across a makeshift desk in what appeared to be a command center, photographs and dossiers painted a picture of surveillance that spanned months. Emma's school schedule, Alex's route home from Lincoln Elementary, Sarah's daily movements tracked with the obsessive detail of a hunter learning prey patterns, and one more photograph that stopped Jack's heart, Catherine, his wife, taken 3 years ago before the accident that wasn't an accident. Notes in the margin documented brake line specifications and timeline windows and the cold mathematics of murder disguised as mechanical failure. They hadn't just killed her, they'd planned it, executed it with the same professional detachment they applied to kidnapping children and eliminating threats. Jack's hands shook as he photographed the documents. Grief and rage fought for dominance, threatening to shatter the operational calm that had kept him alive through circumstances far worse than this. Later, the emotions could come later. Now there was work to do. The remaining guards had consolidated near the warehouse's loading dock, voices carrying fragments of conversation that Jack couldn't quite parse. He circled wide, using the maze of crates as cover, approaching from an angle that maximized his advantage. 6 men, one of him. Numbers that should have been impossible. Jack moved anyway. The first shot took the closest guard in the shoulder, non-lethal, incapacitating the kind of wound that demanded immediate attention from anyone with medical training. As predicted, 2 of the remaining 5 moved to assist their fallen colleague, creating openings in their formation. Jack exploited the gaps with brutal efficiency. Close quarters combat unfolded in fragments, a knife deflected an elbow strike that shattered orbital bone, a chokehold that ended in unconsciousness rather than death. He wasn't here to kill. He was here to send a message. The final 2 guards had training, had discipline, had the good sense to hold their positions and wait for the threat to come to them rather than charging into an ambush. Jack respected the tactics while dismantling them. A flashbang from a fallen guard's kit created the opening he needed. By the time the disorientation faded, both men were zip-tied and bleeding from wounds that would heal with proper medical attention. 8 guards, 12 minutes, no fatalities. The message was clear: whoever came for Jack Miller's family would answer for it. In pain, in failure, in the humiliation of being utterly outclassed by a single man who'd spent 3 years pretending to be nobody. Jack searched the command center systematically, photographing everything, collecting drives and documents that might provide additional intelligence. The evidence mounted financial records tracing payments from Vance Industries, communication logs, mentioning operations and targets and timelines. And in the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet, a file that carried Raymond Chen's photograph and a designation that confirmed every suspicion Jack had harbored. Asset, recruited 2019, current position, head of security, Morgan Technologies. Chen wasn't just compromised. He was one of them. Had been from the beginning. Jack's phone buzzed. Morrison's number. Ghost, we have a problem. I know, Raymond Chen is a plant. I've got documentation. That's not the problem. Morrison's voice carried urgency that bordered on panic. Chen isn't just a plant, he's running the operation. The attack on Morgan Tower, the kidnapping attempt, all of it. He's been coordinating from inside. How do you know? Because he just activated 6 more operatives. They're converging on Morgan Tower right now. Morrison's breathing was harsh. Sarah Hayes, your son. They're both there, Jack. And Chen has access to every security system in the building. Jack was running before the sentence finished. The drive back to Morgan Tower took 8 minutes. 8 minutes of running red lights, in weaving through traffic and praying to gods he'd stop believing in that he wouldn't be too late. 8 minutes of imagining his son's face, Emma's terrified eyes, Sarah's determination crumbling against overwhelming force. 8 minutes that felt like 8 years. The lobby was chaos when he arrived. Security personnel unconscious or restrained, emergency lights, strobing red warnings against walls decorated with corporate art worth more than Jack's annual salary. The elevators were locked down, Chen's work cutting off access to the upper floors. Stairs then. 50 floors of concrete and metal and burning muscles that screamed for rest he couldn't afford. Jack took them three at a time. By floor 30, his legs were cramping. By floor 40, his lungs burned with oxygen debt accumulated over years of desk work disguised as janitorial labor. By floor 45, he'd drawn the weapon he'd taken from the warehouse and was climbing on pure willpower. Floor 50, executive level. Sarah's office and the safe room hidden behind it. Gunfire echoed through the corridor as Jack emerged from the stairwell. 4 mercenaries had established positions around the safe room door, exchanging fire with someone inside. Sarah, he realized, remembering the weapon training she'd mentioned Michael's lessons put to desperate use. Jack didn't announce himself, didn't offer surrender or negotiate terms. He simply moved through the corridor with the lethal precision of 15 years training, putting bullets into legs and arms and shoulders with accuracy that would have impressed his instructors at Fort Bragg. 4 men fell in as many seconds. Not dead dying was too easy for people who threatened children, but incapacitated beyond any hope of continued resistance. The safe room door opened. Sarah emerged, weapon still raised, face streaked with tears and sweat, and something that might have been hope. Jack, the kids, inside, safe. She lowered the weapon with hands that trembled, despite obvious effort to control them. Chen, I know, where is he? He left before the shooting started, said he had to coordinate the security response. Sarah's laugh was bitter. He was coordinating all right, just not for us. Jack moved past her into the safe room. Alex and Emma huddled together in the corner, the boy's arm wrapped protectively around the younger girl, his face pale but determined. Captain Hoppy dangled from Emma's grip, the one-eyed rabbit bearing silent witness to horrors no child should experience. Dad. Alex's voice cracked with relief. Jack knelt, gathered his son into an embrace that said everything words couldn't express. Safe. Alive. Still here, still breathing, still the reason Jack Miller continued to exist. I told Emma you'd come. Alex's words were muffled against Jack's chest. I told her my dad always keeps his promises. That's right, soldier. Jack pulled back, checked his son for injuries, found none. Are you hurt? Did anyone? No, Mrs. Hayes protected us. She had a gun and everything. Jack looked at Sarah standing in the doorway, weapon lowered but still ready. The CEO who'd become a warrior. The widow who'd inherited a war she never asked for. Thank you. You can thank me by ending this. Sarah's voice carried steel tempered by fire. Chen is still out there. Vance is still pulling strings, and I'm done being a target. Then help me hunt them. The words came out before Jack could consider their implications. An offer of partnership from a man who'd operated alone for most of his life. An invitation into a world of violence and secrets that had already cost him everything once. Sarah met his eyes, nodded once. Tell me what you need. The next 12 hours transformed Sarah's penthouse into a command center. Morrison flew in from Virginia, bringing encrypted communications gear and intelligence files that painted a picture of corruption spanning decades. Sarah's corporate resources provided financial tracking and legal expertise. Jack's operational experience translated data into actionable plans. They worked through the night, coffee cups multiplying on surfaces designed for champagne flutes and canapes. The children slept in the safe room guarded by Morrison's people, men Jack had personally served with, the only soldiers he trusted with what mattered most. Chen's gone to ground. Morrison spread surveillance photographs across the table. Last confirmed sighting was 3 hours after the attack, boarding a private flight to an airfield we couldn't track. He'll surface. Jack studied the photographs with eyes accustomed to finding patterns in chaos. He's too invested in this operation to walk away. There's something else happening, something we're not seeing. The board meeting. Sarah's voice carried the flat certainty of corporate knowledge applied to conspiracy. Tomorrow afternoon, Conrad Vance has been pushing for an emergency session, claiming concerns about financial mismanagement. He's a major shareholder I can't refuse without creating legal problems. It's a play. Jack connected the dots with instincts honed by years of reading enemy intentions. Chen softens the defenses, tries to grab leverage through Emma. When that fails, Vance moves to Plan B, corporate acquisition of Morgan Technologies. He can't acquire what I won't sell. He doesn't need you to sell. He needs the board to lose confidence in your leadership. Jack pulled up financial documents on Sarah's laptop. These attacks, the kidnapping attempt, the security breach, all of it creates narrative. Unstable company, dangerous CEO decisions. Board members start wondering if their investments are safe under your control. And Conrad swoops in as the solution. Sarah's jaw tightened. Hostile takeover disguised as rescue, which is why we're going to let him try. Both Sarah and Morrison turned to stare at Jack. Explain. Morrison's voice carried the skepticism of 3 decades in intelligence work. Vance thinks he's winning. Chen's escaped the board meeting, the pressure on Sarah's position. Everything is going according to his plan. Jack's smile held no warmth. So we let him commit. Let him walk into that boardroom tomorrow thinking he's about to claim victory. And then we show the board who Conrad Vance really is. Every transaction, every murder, every act of treason he's committed for the past decade. Jack pulled out Michael's compass. Everything on this drive broadcast to every shareholder and news organization in the country. His empire collapses in real time in front of witnesses he was trying to impress. That's insane. Sarah's voice wavered between admiration and alarm. You're talking about ambushing one of the most powerful men in America in his moment of triumph. I'm talking about justice, the kind that doesn't come from courts controlled by people who owe Vance favors. Jack met her eyes. Michael died to get this evidence. My wife was murdered to keep me silent. Your husband, your daughter, my son, all of them became targets because Conrad Vance decided his profits mattered more than human lives. Tomorrow we prove him wrong. The night deepened around them, plans taking shape in whispered conversations and strategic calculations. Morrison coordinated with remaining assets, loyal operators who'd serve with Jack in lives that officially didn't exist. Sarah leveraged corporate connections, ensuring the board meeting would be broadcast to shareholders and media representatives. Jack focused on the tactical elements, building schematics, security rotations, escape routes, and contingency plans for scenarios that range from bad to catastrophic. But beneath the operational planning, something else was taking shape. A partnership forged in shared loss and common purpose. A trust that surprised Jack with its intensity and rightness. Sarah found him on the balcony near dawn, the city spreading beneath them like a circuit board of lights and shadows. You should sleep. Her voice carried exhaustion, matched by determination. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. I haven't slept properly in 3 years. Jack kept his eyes on the horizon where the first gray light of morning was bleeding into the darkness. Every night I see Michael's face, Catherine's, all the people I couldn't save. Is that why you became a janitor penance for surviving? I became a janitor because it was invisible. Because no one looks twice at the man pushing the mop cart. Because I needed to disappear, and disappearing meant becoming nobody. Sarah moved to stand beside him, their shoulders almost touching. Michael used to talk about you. Before missions, he'd tell me stories about Ghost, the operator, who could get into anywhere and out of anything. He said you were the best soldier he'd ever served with. Michael was the best man I ever knew. Jack's voice roughened with grief that hadn't faded despite 3 years of burial. He didn't hesitate. When the ambush hit, when everything fell apart, he made the call without a second thought. Get the team out. He'd hold them off. That sounds like Michael. It sounds like a hero, the kind of person who sees what needs to be done and does it regardless of cost. Jack finally turned to face her. I'm not that person, Sarah. I ran. I hid. I let fear dictate my choices for 3 years, while the people who killed your husband walked free. You protected your son. I abandoned my duty. No, Sarah's hand found his warm and steady and certain. You made an impossible choice and you chose love over revenge. That's not abandonment, that's humanity. Tell that to Michael. I think Michael would understand better than anyone. Sarah squeezed his hand. He chose to stay behind so you could escape. He chose death so others could live. Do you really think he'd want you to throw away that sacrifice on a mission of vengeance? The question struck deeper than any blow. Jack had carried guilt for 5 years, guilt that had metastasized into self-hatred, into the conviction that he'd failed his best friend by surviving. But Sarah's words offered a different interpretation, A different truth. Michael hadn't died because Jack failed. Michael had died because Michael chose to die, chose sacrifice over survival, chose love for his team over love for himself. The same choice Jack had made when he'd walked away from revenge to protect his son. Tomorrow, Jack's voice came out rough. Tomorrow we finish this. For Michael, for Catherine, for everyone Vance has hurt. Together. Together. The word felt strange in Jack's mouth. Foreign. He'd operated alone for so long that partnership seemed like a half-remembered dream from someone else's life. But standing on Sarah's balcony, watching Chicago wake beneath them, Jack began to believe that alone might not be the only option anymore. Alex found him in the guest room an hour later, small form appearing in the doorway like a ghost seeking permission to exist. Can't sleep. Jack patted the bed beside him. Alex crossed the room, climbed up, settled against his father's side with the trusting ease of a child who'd never had reason to doubt that his father would be there. I had a dream about Mom. Jack's chest tightened. What kind of dream? She was smiling, like in the pictures. She said she was proud of you. Alex's voice carried the matter-of-fact certainty of children delivering messages from beyond. She said you were being brave again. I don't feel brave. That's what Mom said you'd say. Alex looked up with eyes that held too much wisdom for 8 years of life. She said brave people never feel brave. They just do what needs to be done anyway. The words could have come from Catherine's mouth, had come from her mouth countless times during the years of marriage that had transformed Jack from a weapon into something resembling a human being. Your mom was the brave one. Jack pulled his son closer. I was just the guy lucky enough to love her. She loved you too, Dad. That's why she wants you to stop hiding. Is that what she said in the dream? No. Alex smiled. That's what I'm saying. Because I know Mom and I know you, and I know that hiding isn't what either of you would want. Jack stared at his son, this impossible child who somehow understood things that had taken Jack years to learn and more years to forget. When did you get so smart? I had good teachers. Alex yawned, the exhaustion of impossible days finally catching up. Dad, yeah, buddy. Promise me you'll be careful tomorrow. Promise me you'll come back. Jack thought about the plan, the risks, the dozen ways everything could go wrong and end with him bleeding out on a corporate floor while his son waited for a father who would never return. He couldn't make that promise, couldn't guarantee survival in circumstances designed to be lethal, but he could offer something else, something truer. I promise I'll fight with everything I have to come back to you, and I promise that whatever happens, you'll never be alone. Jack kissed his son's forehead. Mrs. Hayes, Colonel Morrison, they'll take care of you, because that's what we do, the people who loved your mom and the people who love you. We take care of each other. That's not really a promise to come back. No, it's a promise that coming back is the most important thing in my world. Jack held his son tighter. And I don't break promises about important things. Alex nodded slowly, accepting the truth wrapped in careful words. Okay, Dad, I trust you. Trust. The word carried weight that threatened to crush Jack under its implications. His son trusted him. Sarah trusted him. Morrison and the operators who'd answered the call trusted him. All of them betting their lives on a man who'd spent 3 years hiding from who he was. Tomorrow, Jack Miller would find out if that trust was justified. Tomorrow, the ghost would stop running and start hunting. And Conrad Vance would learn that some debts couldn't be bought off and some enemies couldn't be eliminated. Some enemies came back from the dead. The board meeting was scheduled for 3 o'clock. Jack arrived at Morgan Tower at noon, dressed in a maintenance uniform that felt like armor from another life. The familiar weight of concealed weapons pressed against his body, a pistol at the small of his back, a knife strapped to his ankle, a communications earpiece linking him to Morrison's team positioned throughout the building. Sarah had insisted on entering through the main lobby, CEO persona intact, showing the world that she refused to cower before threats. Jack had argued against the exposure. Lost. Learned that Sarah Hayes possessed a stubborn streak that rivaled his own. Vance's helicopter lands in 2 hours. Morrison's voice crackled through the earpiece, calm and professional, despite the stakes. 6-man security detail plus Chen. They'll enter through the roof and take private elevators to the boardroom. And the children. Safe room is secure, 2 of my best men on the door, Emma and Alex are playing cards like nothing's wrong. Jack allowed himself a moment of relief. His son was protected. Emma was protected. Whatever happened in the next few hours, the people who mattered most were beyond Vance's reach, or so he believed. The hours crawled past in fragments of preparation and growing tension. Sarah conducted meetings with the theatrical normalcy of someone who hadn't spent the previous night planning corporate warfare. Morrison's people filtered into positions throughout the building disguised as delivery workers and IT technicians and all the other invisible laborers who kept modern commerce functioning. At 2:45, the helicopter appeared on the horizon. Jack watched from a window on the 48th floor as the aircraft circled Morgan Tower, sleek and black, and carrying the man responsible for everything he'd lost. Conrad Vance sat behind tinted glass, invisible, but present, a spider approaching a web he believed he had spun to perfection. The helicopter touched down on the rooftop landing pad. Doors opened. Men emerged in tactical formation around a central figure in a tailored suit worth more than Jack's annual salary. "Target is on the roof, moving to elevators now." Jack memorized faces through the scope of a camera disguised as a maintenance tool. Vance, silver-haired and distinguished, moving with the confidence of a man who'd never faced consequences. Chen trailing the group with the alert tension of a predator scanning for prey. 6 mercenaries whose bearing screamed special operations, whose eyes never stopped cataloging threats. They entered the building through the rooftop access door. Jack moved. The boardroom occupied the 50th floor, a cathedral of glass and steel where fortunes were made and destroyed with the stroke of a pen. Jack positioned himself in an adjacent service closet, watching through a gap in the door as the players assembled for what each believed would be their moment of triumph. 12 board members took their seats, faces carrying the anxious uncertainty of people caught between competing powers. Sarah entered last, her stride carrying the authority of someone who'd built an empire from grief and determination. Then Conrad Vance walked in. The man looked exactly like his photographs, distinguished, polished, radiating the kind of wealth that came from generations of privilege and decades of ruthlessness. He took a seat at the opposite end of the table from Sarah, his smile carrying the satisfaction of a chess player about to call checkmate. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for gathering on such short notice." Vance's voice flowed like honey over broken glass, smooth and reasonable, and utterly false. "Recent events have forced a difficult conversation about the future of this company." "What events?" Sarah's response cut through his performance. "The attempted kidnapping of my daughter, the armed assault on my building." "Precisely my concern." Vance leaned forward with practiced sincerity. "Mrs. Hayes, your leadership has attracted dangerous enemies. The board has fiduciary duty to consider whether such leadership remains in Morgan Technology's best interest." Murmurs rippled through the assembled directors. Months of carefully planted doubt bearing fruit. "You're suggesting I step down?" "I'm suggesting the board consider a merger. Vance Industries absorbing Morgan Technologies under unified leadership. Shareholders retain value. Employees keep their jobs." His smile widened. "And you, Mrs. Hayes, are freed from burdens you clearly cannot handle." "Before the board votes," Sarah's voice carried steel wrapped in silk, "I'd like to present evidence concerning the true nature of these threats and who created them." She pressed a button. Screens throughout the boardroom flickered to life. The first image showed Conrad Vance shaking hands with men whose faces appeared on terrorist watch lists across 3 continents. The second displayed bank records tracing millions from Vance Industries to shell companies in countries with no extradition treaties. The third was security footage, grainy but unmistakable, of Vance himself authorizing weapon shipments to buyers who would use them against American soldiers. "These files were collected by my late husband during a military operation 5 years ago." Sarah's voice didn't waver. "Michael Hayes died protecting this evidence. Died because Conrad Vance couldn't allow the truth to surface." Vance's face cycled through shock denial and finally cold fury. "These are fabrications, desperate lies from a desperate woman. The presentation is being broadcast live." Sarah cut him off. "Every major news network, every shareholder, the FBI, CIA, and Department of Justice are receiving copies as we speak." The boardroom erupted, directors shouting, security uncertain. Vance's mercenaries reaching for weapons before Morrison's people positioned throughout the room, disguised as catering staff, drew their own. Mexican standoff, 12 guns pointed in 12 directions, nobody moving. Jack allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The trap had sprung perfectly. Vance was exposed. The evidence was public. The network was crumbling in real time. Then his earpiece crackled with words that turned his blood to ice. "Ghost, we have a problem." Morrison's voice carried an edge Jack had never heard before. "The safe room guards are down. The children are gone." The world stopped. What? Someone got to them during the chaos. Professional job guards unconscious, not dead. No sign of Alex or Emma. Jack was moving before conscious thought could intervene, years of training overriding the panic that threatened to shatter his focus. He burst from the service closet into the boardroom, gun-drawn eyes finding Chen across the chaos. The security chief stood near the door, phone pressed to his ear, smile spreading across his face as his gaze met Jack's. "Looking for something, Ghost. Where are they?" "Somewhere you can't reach in time." Chen pocketed his phone. "Mr. Vance anticipated this scenario. Insurance, you might call it. The evidence means nothing if you can't testify." Jack's weapon came up. Chen's smile didn't falter. "Kill me, and you'll never find them. The helicopter on the roof leaves in 4 minutes. Your children, both of them, are already aboard." Sarah's voice cut through the standoff. "Emma, you have my daughter. Collateral that ensures our safe departure." Chen's eyes never left Jack. "Lower your weapons. Let Mr. Vance walk out of here. In exchange, the children live." Every calculation Jack had made, every contingency he'd planned crumbled against the simple reality of his son in enemy hands. Alex, with his asthma and his courage and his absolute faith that his father would always come. Emma trusting Captain Hoppy to protect her from monsters that had turned out to be terrifyingly real. "Jack," Sarah's hand found his arm. "Jack, we can't." "I know." The words scraped his throat like broken glass. "I know." He lowered his weapon. Vance straightened his tie composure, returning with the arrogance of a man who'd bought his way out of consequences his entire life. A wise decision. He moved toward the door, Chen and 4 mercenaries forming a protective formation. The evidence is already public, of course. But evidence requires testimony. Witnesses require breathing. When this is over, Mrs. Hayes, I suggest you consider a long vacation. Somewhere without extradition treaties. He paused at the door, turning back with a smile that carried decades of casual cruelty. "As for you, Ghost," Michael Hayes begged at the end. "Did you know that? Begged for his life. For his family. I want you to remember that when you're watching the helicopter fly away with your son aboard." Something broke inside Jack. Not despair. Something colder. Something that had been waiting for exactly this moment. "Conrad." His voice came out flat, emotionless. The voice of the ghost Vance had spent 5 years trying to bury. "You just made the last mistake of your life." Threats from a defeated man. How disappointing. Not a threat, a statement of fact. Jack met his eyes. "I'm going to find you. I'm going to take back my son. And then I'm going to make sure you spend the rest of your miserable life in a cell where money can't buy comfort and connections can't buy freedom." Vance laughed and walked out. Chen followed. The door closed behind them. 60 seconds of silence. Then Jack moved. "Morrison, I need eyes on that helicopter." "Already tracking. They're loading the children there now. Rotors spinning in 90 seconds. "Stairwell to roof. How long?" 3 minutes minimum. "Jack, you can't." "Watch me." He ran. 50 floors of concrete and steel blurred past in a vertigo of desperate speed. His legs burned. His lungs screamed. None of it mattered. Nothing mattered except the image of his son being loaded into a helicopter that would carry him beyond any hope of rescue. 47th floor. 48th. Each landing a countdown toward either salvation or loss. Morrison's voice in his ear. "Helicopter lifting off in 60 seconds. Jack, you are not going to make it." "The hell I'm not." 49th floor. His thighs were cramping. His vision was spotting at the edges. 3 years of pushing mops instead of bodies had taken a toll he couldn't afford. The roof access door loomed ahead. Jack hit it at full speed, shoulder absorbing the impact as steel gave way to Chicago sky. The helicopter sat on its pad rotors, whipping wind across the rooftop. Through the open door, Jack could see 2 small figures huddled in the back. Alex clutching Emma. Emma clutching Captain Hoppy. Both children's faces streaked with tears. Between Jack and his son stood Raymond Chen, and behind Chen Conrad Vance was climbing into the helicopter with the leisurely confidence of a man boarding a private jet. Impressive. Chen drew his weapon. I didn't think you'd make it. Let them go. I don't think so. Chen's aim settled on Jack's center mass. Mr. Vance has plans for those children. Leverage for future negotiations. Insurance against testimony. Conrad, Jack's voice cut across the rotor wash. This is between us. Leave the children out of it. Vance paused in the helicopter doorway, amusement flickering across his features. Between us, there is no us ghost. There's me, a man of vision and resources. And there's you, a maintenance worker with delusions of heroism. He shrugged. Your friend Michael had the same delusions. Look where they got him. Michael died a hero. Michael died a fool. And you'll die the same way if you take another step toward this helicopter. Movement caught Jack's eye. Alex struggling against his restraints in the helicopter's cabin. His son's face was pale, breathing labored, the stress-triggering symptoms that Jack recognized with visceral terror. Asthma attack. Alex was having an asthma attack, and his inhaler was in the safe room 50 floors below. My son needs medical attention. Jack forced his voice steady. Let him go. Keep Emma if you need leverage, but let Alex go. Touching. Vance's voice dripped contempt. But I think not. The boy's condition adds urgency to any future negotiations. Jack looked at his son, at the fear and trust and desperate hope in eyes that were starting to flutter as oxygen deprivation took hold. At the child who'd believed his father would always come, would always save him, would always keep his word. His hand moved to his belt. The knife was there, ceramic blade wouldn't be detected on any scanner, wouldn't be stopped by any vest. One throw, one chance. Chen, Jack's voice dropped to a whisper. You served, I served. We both know there are lines that shouldn't be crossed. I crossed them years ago. Then cross back, right now. Let the children go and walk away. I'll give you a 5-minute head start before I come for you. Chen's laugh held no humor. You're in no position to, Jack threw the knife. Not at Chen, at the helicopter's tail rotor assembly. Ceramic blade met critical machinery with a screech of tortured metal. Sparks erupted. The aircraft lurched, automated systems compensating for sudden imbalance. Chen's attention flickered just for a moment, just long enough. Jack closed the distance between them in 3 strides. His hand caught Chen's gun arm, redirecting the barrel as it fired. The shot went wide. Jack's elbow found Chen's throat. Chen stumbled. Jack stripped, the weapon reversed. It put the former security chief on his knees with the barrel pressed against his skull. Call off your men. Chen coughed. Blood flecked his lips. Kill me. Vance still has the children. I'm not going to kill you. Jack's voice was ice. I'm going to cripple you, starting with your trigger finger. Then your kneecaps, then anything else that seems appropriate. He leaned closer. Unless you call them off. Something in Jack's tone, or perhaps the absolute certainty in his eyes, broke through Chen's defiance. Stand down. The words came out hoarse. All units stand down. The mercenaries around the helicopter hesitated, looking to Vance for guidance. Don't be fools, Vance screamed from the helicopter doorway. Kill him! Kill him! Your men are smart enough to know when they're outmatched. Jack kept his weapon trained on Chen, while his eyes found the mercenaries. The evidence is public. The FBI is already moving. Everyone who works for Vance is going down. But you, he addressed the closest mercenary directly. You walk away right now and I forget your face. Stay and I add you to my list. The mercenary looked at Vance, at Chen bleeding on the rooftop, at the disabled helicopter, and the man who'd crippled it with a thrown knife from 30 feet. I'm out. He dropped his weapon. This wasn't in the contract. One by one, the others followed. 5 guns clattered to the rooftop. 5 men backed away, hands raised, professional calculation, overriding loyalty to a paycheck that might never clear. Vance stood alone in the helicopter doorway, face contorted with fury that bordered on madness. You think this changes anything? I have lawyers, politicians, judges who owe me favors. I'll be out in a week, and when I am dead, Alex's voice thin, wheezing but alive. Jack moved to the helicopter, keeping his weapon trained on Vance, while his free hand found his son. Alex fell against him, small body shaking with the effort of each breath. Inhaler, Jack's voice cracked. Alex, where's your inhaler? They took it. Can't breathe. Jack's training screamed at him to neutralize Vance to secure the scene to maintain tactical advantage. But his son was in his arms turning blue and nothing else mattered. Emma. He looked at the little girl still strapped in her seat, Captain Hoppy clutched to her chest. Amona, sweetie, can you unbuckle yourself? She nodded, small hands working at straps with surprising steadiness. Good girl. Now I need you to do something brave. The stairs we came up, can you run down and find help? Tell them we need Alex's inhaler. Can you do that? Yes, Mr. Jack. Emma scrambled out of the helicopter, paused. Are you going to stop the bad man? Jack looked at Vance, still standing in the doorway, still calculating, still believing money and power could buy his way out of any situation. Yes, sweetheart, I'm going to stop him. Emma ran. Jack lowered Alex to the rooftop, propping his son against the helicopter's landing gear, positioning him to maximize airflow. The boy's lips were turning blue, minutes, maybe less, before permanent damage. You see what you've done. Jack's voice was quiet as he turned to Vance. You've threatened children, murdered soldiers, sold weapons to people who use them against Americans. And for what money you'll never spend, power you'll never enjoy. Everything has a price. Vance's hand moved toward his jacket. Even you, Ghost. What would you take to walk away right now, 10,020,000? Michael Hayes wasn't for sale. Neither am I. Everyone is for sale. Your friend just didn't know his price. Vance's hand emerged holding a small pistol backup weapon easily concealed. Last chance, walk away, take your son, and I'll disappear. You'll never hear from me again. I'll hear from you every night. Jack didn't flinch. Every time I dream about Michael. Every time my son asks about his mother. Every time I remember what you've cost the people I love. Then we have nothing more to discuss. Vance fired. Jack moved. The bullet caught his shoulder instead of his chest, a twist of his body that converted lethal into merely agonizing. Pain exploded through his arm. Blood bloomed across his shirt, but he was still standing, still moving. Jack's weapon came up. One shot, two, not to kill, to disable. Vance screamed as bullets found his knees first, the right, then the left. The billionaire collapsed, pistol skittering across the rooftop legs, suddenly useless beneath him. You shot me! Vance's voice rose to a shriek. You actually shot me! I've shot a lot of people. Jack stood over the fallen man, blood dripping from his own wound weapon, trained on Vance's center mass. Most of them deserved it less than you. You can't do this. I have rights. I demand. You demanded a lot of things over the years. Michael's silence, Catherine's death, my son's life. Jack knelt, bringing his face close to Vance's. Now I'm demanding something. Confession. Right now. Every crime, every deal, every person you had killed. I'll never. Your helicopter's transponder is still broadcasting. News choppers are already en route. They'll be here in approximately 3 minutes. Jack gestured toward the sky where distant shapes were indeed approaching. You can confess to me privately, maintaining some shred of dignity, or you can watch your entire criminal empire laid bare on live television while you bleed on this rooftop. My lawyers will. Your lawyers can't help you. Your politicians are already distancing themselves. Your judges are under investigation. Jack pressed his weapon against Vance's forehead. All you have left is the choice of how history remembers you. A man who accepted responsibility, or a coward who died lying. Something broke in Vance's eyes. The arrogance that had sustained him through decades of casual evil crumbling against the reality of absolute defeat. I did it. The words came out as a whisper. All of it. The weapons sales, the ambush in Kandahar, Michael Hayes, Catherine Miller, most of them. I ordered it all. Why? Because I could. Vance laughed, a broken sound that held no humor. Because money buys power and power buys immunity, and I've spent 50 years proving that men like me don't face consequences. You're facing them now. The roof access door burst open. Sarah emerged first, followed by Morrison, followed by men in FBI windbreakers whose faces carried the grim satisfaction of agents closing a case that had consumed years of investigation. Behind them, moving slower, came a paramedic carrying an inhaler. "Alex!" Jack left Vance bleeding on the rooftop and ran to his son. "Alex, help is here." The paramedic administered the medication with practiced efficiency. Seconds passed, an eternity. Then Alex's breathing eased, color returning to his face, life returning to eyes that had started to dim. "Dad," his voice was weak but present. "I'm here, buddy. I'm here." "You stopped him?" Jack looked back at Vance, now surrounded by FBI agents, hands being cuffed behind his back, despite his screams about his legs. News helicopters circled overhead, cameras capturing every moment of the billionaire's downfall. "Yeah, I stopped him." "Good." Alex managed a weak smile. "I knew you would." Sarah knelt beside them, Emma clinging to her neck. The CEO who'd become a warrior. The widow who'd finally found justice for her husband. "It's over." Her voice carried wonder and exhaustion and relief. "It's actually over." The main threat. Jack looked at Morrison, who stood apart, phone pressed to his ear, face carrying an expression Jack couldn't quite read. "There's still cleanup, Chen's people, Vance's network. The FBI's handling it. They've been building cases for months, just waiting for evidence they could actually use in court." Sarah's hand found his. "You gave them that evidence?" "Michael gave them that evidence. Michael gave everything. So did you." 3 months later, Chicago had relearned how to feel like home. The trial dominated headlines for weeks, a cascade of revelations that reached further than anyone had imagined. Politicians resigned. Corporations dissolved. Military officials faced courts-martial for their roles in covering up years of weapons trafficking and murder. Conrad Vance sat in a wheelchair throughout his proceedings, legs destroyed by the bullets Jack had put through his knees. The billionaire who'd bought his way out of consequences his entire life watched as the justice system, finally armed with evidence that couldn't be suppressed, methodically dismantled everything he'd built. Life sentence, no possibility of parole, maximum security facility where money couldn't buy comfort and connections couldn't buy influence. Justice at last. Jack stood on the balcony of a new apartment, one with working heat and windows that didn't rattle in the wind. The view stretched across Lake Michigan, winter light dancing on water that reminded him of possibilities rather than regrets. "You're thinking again." Sarah appeared beside him, 2 cups of coffee in hand, her presence carrying the warmth that had grown between them over months of shared healing. She'd changed since the tower, less armor, more authenticity. The CEO remained for boardrooms, but here she was, simply Sarah. Morrison called. Jack accepted the coffee. "The last of Vance's network was sentenced yesterday." "Good. That's what I said." He smiled despite himself. Apparently, the colonel expected more enthusiasm. "You've never been enthusiastic about violence. That's one of the things She stopped, started again. "That's something Michael admired about you. The warrior who didn't enjoy war. The warrior who wanted to stop fighting." Jack looked at her. "Sarah, what we've built here, you, me, the children, it's more than I ever expected. More than I thought I deserved." "Deserve has nothing to do with it." Her hand found his. "We survived. We found each other. We built something from the wreckage of what we lost." She squeezed gently. "That's not about deserving. That's about choosing." Laughter drifted from inside the apartment, where Alex and Emma were engaged in some elaborate game involving Captain Hoppy and a fleet of paper airplanes. The sound carried healing that still surprised Jack, evidence that children could survive darkness and emerge with joy intact. "They're good for each other." Sarah followed his gaze. "Emma hasn't had nightmares in weeks. Alex told me Captain Hoppy is officially a general now. Highest-ranking stuffed rabbit in the United States military. Emma takes her command structure very seriously." Jack laughed, a real laugh, the kind that had been buried for 5 years and was only now learning to surface again. "You know what Catherine used to say? That the measure of a man wasn't how he handled success, it was how he handled being given a second chance." She sounds like she was one. She was everything. Jack's voice softened, and for a long time I thought losing her meant losing the chance to be anything good. But Alex kept me going, and then you and Emma and this. He gestured at the apartment, the city, the life they'd built. This feels like the second chance she was talking about. Then honor it. Sarah turned to face him fully. Honor it by being present, by letting the past be past, by choosing every day to build instead of destroy. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's possible. She smiled. I learned that from watching you fight for your son, watching you refuse to give up even when everything seemed lost. The sliding door opened. Alex appeared, Captain Hoppy dangling from one hand. Dad, Emma says rabbits can't be admirals because there's no water in the army. Tell her she's wrong. Captain Hoppy can be whatever Captain Hoppy wants to be. That's what I said. Alex turned to relay this verdict to his fellow commander. Sarah leaned against Jack's shoulder. So, what happens now? Jack considered the question. The future stretched before him like territory, unexplored, uncertain, possibly challenging but no longer empty. Now we have dinner, then homework, then probably an argument about bedtimes. He put his arm around her. And tomorrow we do it again. That sounds remarkably normal. Normal sounds good. Jack watched his son through the glass, explaining military protocol to a 7-year-old who was probably winning the argument. Normal sounds like exactly what we need. The sun was setting over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere in a maximum security prison, Conrad Vance was learning what it meant to face consequences. Somewhere in a cemetery, Michael Hayes rested beside a headstone that finally told the truth about how he died. And somewhere in Catherine's memory, Jack hoped she could see what he'd built from the ashes of what they'd lost. Dad, Alex's voice carried through the glass. Emma's cheating at cards. I am not. She looked at my hand. His hand was in my face. Jack smiled at Sarah. Duty calls. It always does. They walked inside together, leaving the balcony to the fading light, entering a home filled with laughter and argument and the beautiful chaos of family. The ghost had finally stopped walking, and for the first time in 5 years, Jack Miller was exactly where he belonged.